Peace, brothers and sisters. I'll try and speak slowly because I notice I just go into spasm sometimes. Yeah, we carry on. Part 2. We stopped at speech of Allah, yeah?
And we said to Musa, he doesn't then say what he said to Musa.
Well, yeah, so that when Allah spoke to Musa, takliman, he spoke to him, we don't know what that is. It's not the Quran.
So I said in the first part, so when God spoke to Moses on this planet, it was on earth, so God spoke to him, you understand? But what Mohamed spoke to God, he had to travel, right? Which makes no sense because God doesn't change his ways, right? God says he doesn't change his ways. And God, he's not somewhere for us to travel to get to. You understand that? So that's against the Quran.
It's not the Quran, right? So previous books is a good example of that. So that is a speech of God. When Allah spoke, kallama, he spoke to Musa. That is a speech of Allah, which is not the Quran. What other thing which...
What do they think the Quran is? Do they think the Quran is the whole book? So the book is the Quran. So that's what I keep saying. They don't know their own book. The book is not just the Quran, okay? And I'll come to you from the Quran to prove it, right? From the Quran to prove it, right? The Quran is not, the book is not just the Quran, right? The Quran has Injil, has the Torah, has the Furqan, has the Hikmah, has 7 things, okay? All in one book, okay? But the Quran is different. The Quran is for us. It's the deen, right? It's what we're supposed to do, what we're not supposed to do. That's the Quran. Do you understand? That's it. Carry on.
Speech of Allah, which is not the Quran in the Quran. Which is something which counts as the speech of Allah, which does not include the Quran itself. And the evidence of that is in the Quran.
Can't wait.
The Injil is another thing of the previous books, yeah? So all of the previous books, okay, what else?
Or that is not the speech of Allah.
No, that is the speech of Allah, but it's not the Quran.
I don't want one like...
They all speech of Allah. I don't get it. They all speech of Allah because Allah created all languages. So it's not limited. So the Torah was sent to the Jews. They had their own language. We don't know what Adam spoke, what language. All other prophets, what language they spoke. But and then it comes to the Arabs, right? He sent them an Arab prophet. So he sent the Quran or the whole book in Arabic for them to understand because they speak Arabic. He's not going to speak to them in Chinese, is he? Every language you can hear today, God created. It's God. We don't do anything. We're not smart to do anything.
People are speaking, but Allah is quoting them. Is that what you're talking about?
No.
Just tell them.
Stories of what?
Like when Iblis, for example, God asked Iblis to prostrate and,
Alright, so when Allah He speaks to, for example, a third party or some other historical figure, we know that the conversation that's recorded indicates that Allah speaks to someone else. Okay. We know that the ones who Allah spoke to directly are people like Musa alayhi salam, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam himself.
That's a lie, yeah? He didn't speak to him, yeah? Obviously. He didn't speak to Muhammad. Only think that Allah says in the Quran he spoke to Moses, okay? Right? And I can prove it from the Quran.
Not that many, actually. But let me give you a hint on this one, yeah? What does Allah say if He wants something to be?
And did God speak to Adam or not? He did speak to Adam, didn't he? So Adam and Moses, God spoke to them.
Okay, is that, so kun, be. Okay, is kun a speech of Allah? Yes. So kun is an example of speech of Allah, which is not the Quran.
Confused. But it came from the Quran now. From the book. Yeah, but you're confusing them because the Quran is separate from the book. Right? But it's all in one book. So it's all the speech of Allah. Because they don't differentiate between the Quran and the book. It's confusing them. They don't know. They don't understand all this crap. They don't. They really don't, because it makes no sense. And when it doesn't make no sense to these people, because they haven't studied or anything, they think they're stupid. They think this guy knows better. But I'm waiting. Just give them the verse.
And this is when we say that Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, he's kalimatullah. He's the word of Allah. Kalima is one word. It's of a potential of a plurality of words, which means that what is that speech of Allah? What word? What's kalimatullah? What is Isa? It's actually a common question. Christians come with it and say, look, you guys believe he was the word, and the word was flesh. Therefore, what we say is, no, he's not the word and the word was flesh. The word here refers to what? What word? Kun itself. That is the word. Because in the Quran it says, إِنَّ مَثَلَ عِيسَى عِنْدَ اللَّهِ كَمَثَلِ آدَمَ خَلَقَهُ مِنْ تُرَابٍ ثُمَّ قَالَ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُونُ. That the similitude of Adam with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like the similitude or Jesus like the similitude of Adam. That he created him from dust and he said to him, be, and he was. So this is really the first thing.
Let's stop here for kun, yeah? The word kun, be, okay? Alright. God said when he wanted something, he tells it. He tells it to be, so it will be, right? But he tells it, okay? يَقُولُ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونُ. For God to say to something, to speak to something, that thing already exists. يَقُولُ لَهُ, right? It means he tells it. So if the thing doesn't exist, how can God talks to it? Do you know what I mean? So whatever God says to kun or be, that thing already exists, but not to us. We don't see it. So that's when God shows us that thing. He tells it to show itself. Do you understand? Because he created everything. Everything's been created, right? There's no new creation. The Quran wasn't created for Mohammed or wasn't sent down to Mohammed. The Quran existed since the beginning. Do you understand? All these books existed from the start of the creation. So that's why God said when he wants something, he tells that thing be and it will be. That means that thing already existed, right? It's not from nothing. Do you understand? So how can it not be a speech of Allah? How can it not be from the Quran when God is actually as his speech? I understand. It's in the book. Do you understand? So that's why we said the Quran. No, you're not supposed to say Quran. Say the book, right? Quran is entirely different, but he doesn't know that.
Why? So the Quran is a subset of the speech of Allah. A hadith Qudsi can be said to be sometimes the speech of Allah. You can use this. Qala Allah. That's what the Prophet said.
God forgive these people, honestly. Okay, I can use a hadith by saying Qala Allah. Right? That means God said. So what he gave, like example, is nothing to do with what he's talking about, right? He just gives things are in the book, he said them, and then he's trying to make up the hadith. It's not in the book, but it's the word of Allah, speech of Allah. But it's not in the book, it's in the hadith that a Prophet Muhammad did not write down. As I said before, if this is important, the Prophet Muhammad would have wrote this down because it's not his speech. He's not allowed to say, all right, just let it go, right? God told me this speech, but I'm not going to write it down, right? I'm going to let few people, my companions, to spread it around for thousands of years, right? Imagine if he'd done that with the Quran. We won't have the Quran, would we? We won't have the book. We won't.
He says, Qala Allah. He says, Allah said, and then he says whatever he says. However, there are some important differences. The first important difference is that the Hadith Qudsi is not part of a wider discourse. It's not part of the Quran, the surahs are part of a wider discourse. So each surah, it acts as a message.
That's exactly what I said. Exactly what I just said now, right? Exactly what I just said now.
Actually, the word surah itself comes from the Arabic word sur, which means gate. I'm not sure if you know this.
Doesn't
each
matter.
surah is self-contained, as if it's gated off from everything else.
No, it's not. No, a Quran is whole, right? There's no separation from the Quran, right? The Quran is one whole book, right? There's no separation, right? That separation was done. You can't just have one book from A to B. So how the hell, if you're going to know a verse, right, and then you look for another verse, you don't know where to look for it. You have to read the whole book. So that's why there is surah. That's why they split it in surah, 114. So you know what to look for. That's why they have the numbers of the ayat, the verses. So we know what to look for. Imagine there was no numbers, right? No numbers in the Quran at all. How are we going to find anything? So every time we look for something, we have to go back and read the whole book. Unless you memorize the whole book. And you still get confused. So whatever he's saying now, it's just bullshit.
So it works by itself. And if you want to read any surah of the Quran, it's intelligible and coherent by itself, as well as in conjunction with other surah.
So it's not separated.
One doesn't-
He just said separated, and now he said it's conjunction with others. So it's not. It's one book. It's one book. There's no. It's one book. All the surah. The reason for the surah is for us to know, right, where this surah is and the number of the verse, so we can go to it. But the Quran, because there's questions in the Quran. Let's say in Surah Al-Baqarah, right, the cows. Questions there. You find the answer somewhere else altogether. In another surah, number 110. Do you know what I mean? So it's one book. It's not separated. There's no separation. No way. That's not how the Quran works.
To get a full flavor of the message of Islam by reading the entirety of the Quran. And this might be an important point because a lot of people that want to know Islam get put off by the fact that there's 6,236 verses and they say, well, I don't want to read 600 pages. You don't have to read 600 pages. Just if for example, if someone wants to get a flavor of a story in the Quran, maybe you could recommend for them Surah Yusuf, because it's an entire surah, chapter 12 of the Quran. If someone wants to get a flavor of some of the ahkam and
What do you mean a flavor? I don't understand. Is he talking about milkshake or something? What do you mean a flavor? Get a flavor. You have to read the whole Quran. Someone comes to me and just say, I just read the book. Read the whole book. I don't tell him go to Joseph or go to that. No, just go read the whole book. Take your time with it and read it all. Because you can't understand it if you read it in parts. You really can't understand it. So you have to read the whole book, and then when you finish it, you read it again. And you read it again, and again, and again, and again. That's how you deal with the Quran. You don't go from one verse, getting a flavor. What do you mean flavor? So God would not send the whole Quran then, just sends one verse or something. But there's no flavors. There is laws and regulations, and there is stories, and they all conjunction with each other. Do you know what I'm saying? They all relate to each other. All the verses and the chapters relate to each other as one book, and you have to read it all. There's no flavors.
The prohibitions and the commands and these kind of things in Baqarah, Surah Al-Baqarah, for example, has so many of that kind of thing. If someone wants to get a flavor of the eschatological
there
nature
is
of the Quran,
in other verses though. There is in other chapters though. So that's not complete. Surah Al-Baqarah won't tell you everything. So it needs other verses, other chapters to go with.
then the last kind of 10, 20, 30 surahs, if not the last couple of juz, in fact, will give them that flavor. So you don't need to, someone does not need to read the entire Quran to get a flavor of what the Quran is about. Each surah is self-contained in and of itself. But in addition, it's intelligible in conjunction with all the other surahs as well. So the first thing that makes a difference between the Quran and the Hadith Qudsi say is that the Quran is intelligible as part of a wider discourse. Number two is that Hadith Qudsi is conceivable that you can have a Hadith Qudsi but which is weak. And if the Hadith Qudsi is weak, then we're not sure if Allah actually said this thing.
Now, See what they do? Now you have to have doubt now. Because he's saying that speech from the Quran, okay? That speech from Allah, not in the Quran, but some of them are weak. So they don't know if God said it or not. So it has doubt. There's doubt if God said it or not. So now I have to put my doubt. Now, if I was not a believer, I was like hate the Muslim, whatever you call Muslims or whatever. So I just say, what makes you think that the Quran is full then? It's complete. Because he's saying there's speech not in the Quran and other speech is weak. So what makes you, the Quran is all strong? Or, it just puts doubt, all right? Puts doubt in people's head, all right? They create doubt in people's heads, you know what I mean? But carry on.
Like anything, hadiths are divided, as you know, into different types. There's Sahih, there's Hasan. According to a Tirmidhi, Hasan li ghayrihi. Hasan means, so Sahih has authentic. Hasan, which is, good. Hasan li ghayrihi is good
Listen. All this, yeah.
in consideration with another hadith.
All this, yeah, they call it science of hadith and ilm al-rijal and other science apparent to them is how can you follow something? You can't just say that in the Quran there's a weak verse of the Quran or good one or something is being put in there or something. You can't say this about the Quran. So the Quran is pure. It's obvious. This is it. But they created something that they called weak, something put down there, something created by someone else. And then, but we have to follow it with the Quran, and if we don't follow that, and all this hassle and all that, they actually done it themselves. This science was done by their clerics, right? Done by their clerics, and they shut down the knowledge after that, right? Because we can't say anything different from what dead clerics can say, because otherwise, because we don't know, we weren't there, we're not clever enough, we're not smart enough, so all the smart people God created at that time, and after those dead people, when they died, that's it. Shut shop. Anyone who comes after those people is an idiot, right? And this law repeat what the dead people have been saying. We don't know if they said it, we don't know who said it, we can't go back and you know what I mean, like verify, but we have to believe in hearsay. And we have to believe these people, they're telling the truth, right? Like Mohamed hijab.
And then you have da'if, which is weak.
Yeah.
And then you have grades of munkar, mawdu',
Yeah.
matruk. Mm-hmm. But this is not the space for this kind of discussion.
No,
Mutawatir, they say, is mass transmitted.
Okay. Mutawatir is not mass transmitted. That's not the word. Tawatur has nothing to do with his saying. I said it before, this is how, the Tawatur is how we got the Quran. The Prophet said it to a bunch of people, those bunch of people said it to another bunch of people, and so on and on and on and on. That's why it spread like that. So one person dies, the Quran doesn't die, right? With the Hadith it's different. The Prophet said it to one person, and that person said it to another person, and another person said it to another person. So it's all individuals, you see. So if I told you before, if Abu Hurairah died, we would have lost 5,000 hadiths. If anyone else dies, if the Bukhari died, oh my God, we won't have anything. We will not have anything. We won't have Islam anymore if the Bukhari died, because he had 600,000 hadiths in his head, right? And by himself, he decided to make some of them weak, some of them strong, some of them sahih, some of them not, by himself. No one helped him. And then when he finished his book, he showed it to the clerics, and they said, oh, and then they followed it from there. So this Bukhari created Islam, basically, according to them.
تواطؤهم على الكذب, the تعريف, the definition of tawatur, mashhur, and so on. The Quran is undoubtedly something which has been mass transmitted, is undoubtedly something which nothing of it is weak.
Yeah, said it. I said it. Nothing of it is weak. So why are you following the weak shit?
And everything in it is part of a wider discourse. And there are special privileges from an Islamic perspective of reading the Quran that one can never get reading a Hadith Qudsi. Among which is what the Prophet ﷺ, he said in the Hadith, لا أقول ألف لام ميم حرف ولكن ألف حرف ولام حرف وميم حرف وللحسنة عشرة أمثالها. Now I don't say alif lam mim is one letter, but alif is a letter, and lam is a letter, and mim is a letter, and for each letter is 10 times the reward. So in other words, when you read the Quran, according to us,
Okay. Oh, let me finish.
according to the Prophet ﷺ, each letter you get 10 rewards for it. That's not the case with that hadith. Any hadith. Well,
Okay. Now you came up with something that they taught us all our lives, right? When you read the Quran, yeah, every letter, right, you read, you get hasanat, right? It's a good deed. So every hasana, every letter you read, you get hasana. First of all, Mohamed hijab, if a prophet explained, like you saying, explained, right, the Quran, right, the same thing you said, alif lam mim, right, ALM, what do they mean? Why didn't the prophet explain exactly what these three letters mean? Why haven't you got a hadith, the prophet explaining the meaning of these letters that at the start of every verse, like Yasin, Alif Lam Mim, things like that? Why didn't a prophet explain it? Explain things like that? Why? Why you haven't got a hadith to explain it? And where did God in the Quran tells you He's gonna reward you for reading the Quran without trying to understand it? Do you understand? You read the Quran, you get good deeds. But imagine like that's why we read it quick. That's why we read it fast. That's why we sing it. That's why we have to finish it in Ramadan. So you see what I'm saying? Because we actually running after the deeds, right? The deeds that God never promised us. This lot promised their mates and their friends, right? Because they said the Prophet said in the hadith, God did not say anything in the Quran about this. God asked us to study the Quran, right? To read it slowly, to try and understand it. That's what God said. And then when we understand the Quran, right? So we practice it in our lives, right? Obviously, part of it is doing some good deeds. So when you understand what God is asking you to do, be good to people, so you be good to people. You said that's when you get your reward. Not for reading the Quran, for practicing the Quran. That's how you get your reward, not for reading. So I can be reading every day the Quran. Look how many deeds, so I go to heaven. Is that what you're saying? So I go and commit crimes and do whatever God tells me not to do, but I come back home and read the Quran, and then I go to heaven because obviously my deeds. Imagine that, reading how many letters in the Quran. If I read one every day, I go to heaven without understanding it, without practicing it, without knowing what's in it, right? Because 99.9% of Sunnis and Shia don't understand the Quran. Do not practice the Quran. They practice the Hadith.
no. Moreover, you need to, as we mentioned, before you touch the book, you can't be janib. Like, if for example, you've had intercourse, or ejaculated, or a woman on her menstrual cycle, she cannot even recite the Quran except with a few exceptions. For example, I'm not going to go into that, but the idea of purity, a physical purity, is required before approaching the Quran. This is not a requisite or even a prerequisite for the hadith, even if it's a hadith Qudsi. You can recite the Quran in prayer. You can't recite any hadith Qudsi in prayer. It shows you the status of the Quran.
You heard what he said. We are not supposed to be. If someone, see, I keep going between him and me, the Quran. Okay. So far, has not said anything from the Quran. Right? He's just blah 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 blah. Right. But he said something from the Quran. I have to stop him here. He said you can't touch this book. The book we've got today. Right. The Mus'haf we have today. You can't touch it unless you washed, right? Unless you, if you like, I don't know, for a woman, it's menstruating, right? She can't touch the book we've got here today, right? The book that we must have, yeah, she can't touch it because it's forbidden. Where did he get that from? Where did he get, if I have sexual intercourse with my wife, after that, I'll have to wash to read the Quran. Where did he get that from? Has he got a verse from the Quran? No, he hasn't. He has one verse, right? One verse, right? I'll come back in a second, all right? Just give me a second, all right? Just tell you what the verse is, all right? Now, he's bringing that, he's saying what he just said about one verse, all right? It comes from one verse. Kitab al-Maknoon, all right, which is Surah Al-Waqi'ah, chapter 56, verse 78, all right? Kitab al-Maknoon, لا يمسه إلا المطهرون. Listen, right? If you're English and you can't read Arabic, I'll explain it to you, all right? But these people don't send you the wrong way. Get كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون. All right? مطهرون, all right? Because there's two words in Arabic. There's a mutahharun and there's a mutatahhirun. Okay? They have two different meanings. So, because when the word in Arabic changes, you have to change the meaning. Can't be like two different words mean the same thing. It does not work. Not in the Quran. Okay? Not in the Quran. So, al-mutahharun, they're not the mutatahhirun. Let's read this verse. This is an honorable Quran. A maknoon in Arabic is something hidden, something unseen. That's what the word maknoon means. Go back to the root of the word maknoon, and that's exactly what it means. Something hidden, something we can't see. Right? See, this is what God is saying in this verse. This is an honorable Quran, right? In a hidden book, unseen book. None can touch it except the mutahharun. Mutahharun. He didn't say al-mutatahhirun, he said al-mutahharun. Al-mutahharun are the ones that, you know, when mutahharun is the purified ones. They didn't purify themselves. Someone had to purify them. Then you mutahhar, okay? I know it's a bit confusing for English speakers, but I've got a very good example. Very good example, all right? So, God is talking here about the angels, all right? لا يمسه إلا المطهرون. He did not say, not the mutatahhirun, okay? The angels being purified by Allah. So this book God is talking about, away from us, we can't, an honorable Quran, in a hidden book, we can't see that book, all right? None can touch it except the purified ones, which is the angels, all right? This book God is talking about, it's not talking about the book, right? The book, the mushaf we read from today, this man-made book. When I say man-made, it's not the speech of man, it's the speech of God. But who distributed it, copied it and all that? Man. In a book, just a normal book, okay? Nothing special about this book. The speech in it is special, you understand? But let's read Surah Al-Baqarah, all right? I'll bring out the verse he was just talking about. وَيَسْأَلُونَ Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 222, all right? وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ قُلْ هُوَ أَذًى فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ فِي الْمَحِيضِ وَلَا تَقْرَبُوهُنَّ حَتَّى يَطْهُرْنَ فإذا تطهرن فأتوهن من حيث أمركم الله إن الله يحب التوابين ويحب المطهرون متطهرين. You see, متطهرين, not المطهرين. All right. Let me show you how the word changes. All right. Okay. يطهرن. Okay. يطهرن. يتطهرن. You see that the first letter here with two dots on the top, yeah? That makes a difference in the word. That makes a big difference in the word, all right? This, all right, when you said yathorn, it's nothing to do with them. When the blood stops, let me explain it in English, but I'll give you the verse in English, yeah? Right. Let me give you the verse in English so you understand what I'm talking about. It's about menstruation, yeah? They ask you about menstruation. So people with the Prophet asked him about menstruation. Right? He can't even talk to them about the menstruation without God saying say. So I'm saying, whatever in the Quran, whatever people ask the Prophet Muhammad about something, God always tell him say. So he's got no say in the subject. Do you know what I'm saying? He's got no say in the subject. So that's why he couldn't come up with hadiths. He couldn't say haram or halal. He couldn't do that from his head. Do you know what I mean? This is what la yantiqu anil hawa is. Do you know what I'm saying? He only follows the Quran. You understand? So they ask you about menstruation. Say it's harmful. You shall avoid sexual intercourse with women during menstruation. Do not approach them until yathorn. Yathorn, I mean, they're purified. What does it mean? The blood stops. Women can't make the blood stops, right? Themselves. God does that. Do you know what I'm saying? God does that because that's their body. They didn't create it, God created it. So the blood stops not up to women, it's up to their body, which God created, which God's going to purify. You understand? Right? Until they're pure, until the blood stops. Once it stops and they wash, now this is yatataham, right? This is yatataham. There you go. When they wash, that means yatataham. That is, it's up to them to do it, to wash or not. Do you understand? That's yatataham, okay? Yathorn, it's nothing to do with them. It's to do with the biological body. They can't help it. They can't change it. But yatataham, you take a wash, all right? After that, after they wash, that you may have intercourse with them in a manner designed by God. God loves the repenters and He loves those who are mutatahhirun. Mutatahhirun, that means the clean ones. So when He was talking about the angels, He was talking about what? Mutahharun, the purified ones by God. Right? When God said mutatahhirun, that means He's talking about a human being who wash, who keeps himself clean. Do you understand? So God here, go back to the verse, what He said, this is an honorable Quran, in a hidden book. We can't see it. None can touch it except the purified ones. God is talking about the angels. Right? This book God is talking about is not the one we've got in our hands. For these people to come up with women in menstruation can't touch that book, people like have intercourse, they can't touch that book, that's not from the Quran. Right? Does he know that? He doesn't even know that. And he's teaching other people. He doesn't even know that about the Quran. You understand? So, let's carry on. It's 32 minutes, man. 32 minutes. Let's one more because...
The word of Allah is very, very high. Now there is another istishkal that some people may have, a problem that people have. Can it be that some words of Allah are better than others? And the majority of scholars say yes.
Yeah.
They're scholars, yeah? They're scholars, right?
Yeah, so majority of, for example...
He hasn't given anything from the Quran, yeah? He hasn't, has he? Now, between me and him, the Quran, but he hasn't said anything from the Quran. But what he's saying, though, is he saying a verse from the Quran to prove what he's saying? It's not. Clerics, right? Just wait, between me and him, the Quran. He started with giving me hadith, right? And then he hasn't said anything from the Quran. So whatever he says from the Quran, that's the only thing I can talk to him about. That's why this video is going to be long, because he doesn't talk about the Quran. He doesn't give verses from the Quran. He gives, I don't know, this blah, 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 and clerics and...
Honestly, I think the Sufi mentions this. He gives the example of, in his book, Al-Niqaya, actually. He wrote a book, a very famous one, called Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran, but he also wrote a book called Al-Niqaya, which has been made into a small nazm called Nazm al-Zamzami. And he mentions this in that nazm, which he basically says that, for example, if you compare Surah Ayat al-Kursi with Tabbat Yada Abi Lahabin wa Tab, he's saying that Ayat al-Kursi is higher. I mean, it's talking about Allah, the other one's talking about someone who's going to the hellfire. So, go figure in a sense, like, you know, which ones of...
That makes sense. That really makes sense. Someone is talking about Allah, the other one's talking about the judgment day, whatever, yeah? He's talking about, but what did God said? one verse is better than another, please. Give me something from the Quran, because between me and you, a Quran, man, right?
Of a verse which is entirely dedicated to Allah, or one that's dedicated to the demise and destruction of one of the enemies of Islam. Obviously, both are Quran and both are beautiful and have the i'jaz in them and all that kind of thing. But the idea of tafadul, or the idea of some parts of the Quran, some aspects of the Quran being more virtuous and of higher value than others, is something that's accepted by the scholars.
No. More important, yeah, there is verses from the Quran, they're more important than other verses, because why are they important? Because they're talking about the law, right? So, if I read the Quran, I have to get what God wants me to do and what He doesn't want me to do. So these things are more important, right? Not better. They're more important because I have to know what was forbidden, what wasn't forbidden. So these verses are important, but not chapters. I'm talking about verses, because that's the ones I need for guidance, you see. That's the one I need for guidance. And I can prove it from the Quran. Do you get it? I can prove it from the Quran itself.
These are important tamhidat, preambles, because obviously, if someone says, well, if you guys believe in Hadith Qudsi, you're saying that some speech is better than other speech, and we know how to answer these questions now. We don't feel like we're trapped. Yeah, we do believe that some speech is better than other speech, in fact. Is that unintelligible as a proposition?
Same thing. The last ayat of Surah Al-Baqarah, it says relief from Isra and Miraj. Those two ayats were revealed within there, so there's more virtue in those two ayats than other ayats.
Yeah, I mean, there is a difference.
Look, he said the verses about Isra and Mi'raj are better than others, right? Where are they, this Isra and Mi'raj? Wait, give me something, give me from the Quran.
Whether they were revealed, accepted, but definitely those two, the Prophet ﷺ, he put them in the Azkar al-Masa, in fact, things that he would, two last ayahs of the Surah Al-Baqarah, which he would recite all the time, every night.
The Mi'raj, I've done a whole video about it. It's like he went up there, yeah, but it hasn't given me a verse, hasn't it? It's between me and the Quran. He hasn't given me a verse from Mi'raj, right? He doesn't give me a verse from the Mi'raj.
And he even said in the hadith that whoever recites those two, it would suffice him. It would suffice him, reading them, meaning it will be enough for him. They're very powerful ayat, you know, which we should think about. Anyway, now the next order of business. So we talked about the first thing is, what is Kalam Allah? It's the speech of Allah, it's uncreated. Obviously the Mu'tazila didn't believe that. Alright? They believed that Allah, His speech was created. We're not going to go into a great discussion, but I'll give you one reason why they said that. That they said that, you know, if you look at the Quran, although, to be completely honest with you, they used the Quran as a supporting evidence to the otherwise kind of...
You know these people called Mu'tazila, yeah, they call them Mu'tazila. I swear to you, I promise you, they're better than them a million times. They know about the Quran. They have few things that I don't agree with, but they use the Quran as their criteria. They base all their knowledge, that's why they call them Mu'tazila. See, and this law existed when after the Prophet died. It started existing. Those people are following the Quran. And obviously there's some things went in there, they're not supposed to be in there, but that's why they call them Mu'tazila. Because they didn't want to believe what they believed in. Do you know what I'm saying? Because these people, after the Prophet Mohammed, they killed each other and created all these books. And this Mu'tazila, they really held on to the book of Allah. You see, that's why they make the hadith against them. Okay, it's all politics. This hadith is all politics. They make the hadith against them, like the hadith we made up yesterday. It's like a prophecy. I mean, about the prophecy of Muhammad. No, those hadiths were created to attack the people that believed in the Quran. You're saying a prophecy.
No argumentation. And if you know how the Mu'tazilis made an argument, that's a whole philosophical discussion we can't really get into. You know, Jawhar al-Arad and how these things and atoms and all that kind of thing.
I'll have to stop here because they go into things that they don't understand, right? The things they don't understand. No human being, no matter how smart he is, the scientists, whoever you can tell me, things we don't understand, and they try to find sense to make sense of them, and they make me laugh when you start doing that. You know what I'm saying? Because as a human being, we don't know shit about shit. We don't know a lot. We've only been given a small knowledge. So and we're trying to find out about things, right? We can't. We don't have the knowledge to understand. We really don't, because we're limited in knowledge. Do you understand? No matter who we think we are, we're limited in knowledge. Right? So this is part 2. Wait for me for part 3.